Hello and welcome to the channel today. I'm Will and I'm going to be talking about my favourite 8 fantasy reads of 2024 so far. So you may be thinking, why have I chosen 8? It's quite a random number. Well, I've chosen 8 because we are now into September, so I thought I'd pick one for each month that has already passed. So obviously January to August. So I'm recording this just as August ends and it will be coming out in September. And so I haven't just randomly plucked a number out of the air. So I'm going to pick 8. These are not ranked. These are 8 fantasy books I have loved in 2024. I've been the reading highlights of the genre, which I read probably is my most predominantly read genre. It may not be so much in 2024 because a lot of uni reads, but over the course of my life has been the genre that I've read the most. And so let's just get into it. And I said it's not in order, but Sword of Kaigen, the first one I'm choosing, bit of a spoiler, 5 seconds before I show it, is possibly the top of the pile because it just absolutely blew me away. I read this in July, which was one of the best reading months and reading weeks in particular of my life. Read a few books that I just absolutely adored, and The Sword of Kaigen, of course, was one of them. Hence why I'm talking about it today. This is a standalone fantasy, self-published, which is just wonderful. It is heartbreaking, it is moving, wonderful character cast who just leap from the page. One of the best cast of characters I've ever come across. It has a really unique world building process, and I love this mix of, at first I was a bit conflicted that there was a lot of modern elements, like it feels quite archaic, and then suddenly they're talking about video games. I was like, what is going on here? But it works really well, and I won't go too far into explaining it because it kind of ruins part of the world building and the political machinations of the Sword of Kaigen, but it goes really well and it just pays off. I'm a character-driven reader. This is a character-driven book. There's a few characters at the centre that are just absolutely just mind-blowing how real they feel, and their growth is just unbelievable. They feel so human and natural and organic, and their reactions to what is going on around them just invested me in their journey so much. As I said, it's heartwarming but heartbreaking. It moved me, and it brought a lot of tears as well. And I think there's a lot of freedom in that it is self-published because it subverts your expectations so much. And the ending might not click with a few people, but I think most people who have read it have really enjoyed and appreciated how different the ending is. And I think if it was traditionally published, that would not have been possible. And so it's also really interesting seeing the freedom and how different self-published books can be. So yeah, that's The Sword of Kaigen, the first book I'm talking about today. Some fantasy, just top of the list, be a book that I'm recommending to many people. Next up, some more self-published actually, and that is Return to Edan by Philip Chase, the third book in the Edan trilogy. Of course, just to be up front, I'm lucky enough to call Philip Chase a friend, Dr. Fantasy himself, but I believe that does not influence me at all in why I'm choosing Return to Edan for this list. I love modern fantasy, I love classic fantasy. This is a perfect blend of both. My brother Ed put it perfectly, in my opinion, when he said that it is really a world where David Gemmell's characters have invaded the landscapes of Tolkien. And that really just hit the nail on the head. The landscapes are described beautifully and their character unto their own, and the magic system does bring them into play at times. It's got that Tolkien-esque feeling as well, with kind of this use of language, some poems, some songs brought into the mix, but in such a brilliant way. And then you've got the characters on top of it. As I said, there's this ethereal feeling to the world, but there's the grit that is much more comparable to modern fantasy. And I love how Philip Chase, you can see the inspirations, but it is also something very unique unto itself as well. Book 2 of the series, The Prophet of Edan, feels like it could be the end of a fantasy series. And so going into this, I was very unsure what was going to happen. By then, I'd learned to trust Philip Chase. I really clicked with his writing style. I loved his characters and I was engaged in the plot. So I didn't have any doubt I would enjoy it, but I was just dumbfounded. I had no idea where this was going to go. But it, right off the bat, whilst it is very twisty-turny and you don't know quite where it's going, it still hooks you and engages you and keeps you enthralled. You're just waiting for where the story's going to go. I love that Philip Chase really hit home his main themes, which are about kind of found family, about the sense of duty, what do we owe the world, trying to fight for those you love. He keeps that very intimate feeling within the epic scope of the story, and that is really achieved to a greater level through how he subverts your expectations. And there's almost like a dual ending here, and I won't say anything more because of spoilers, but I really loved how that was managed, how it gave us kind of the fruition of those fantasy tropes that we know and love, that give us that satisfaction, but he made them different, he made them unique. And this is a series that I want so many people to read, and I'm so happy that Philip Chase published these only 3 months apart as well, because I don't know if I would have been able to bear waiting for years to read this series to its full. I mean, I loved book 1, so I would have been patient enough, but I'm so happy we've got all 3 already. And there's something very different, something I wouldn't have picked up if it wasn't for uni. And I talked about it in my what I read in uni first year video. It is Watchmen, a graphic novel. It is quite canonical. It's known as one of the most successful and influential graphic novels of all time. Watchmen, we follow a group of characters who are basically vigilantes. They were heroes. They don't really have superpowers other than one, but they became heroes in their own right. But then how they served society, these vigilantes who are heralded as heroes, then society started turning them, and they were used as a scapegoat to basically blame. And now it's illegal to be a vigilante, so we're seeing where have they moved to. Some have continued to operate in this world, but illegally. Others have moved on to other spheres of society. Some are huge celebrities, some have withdrawn from the world. And as I said, there's one that is pretty supernatural as well. I love that Watchmen through this is an exploration of kind of the psychological impact of being a hero. It's really gritty, it's really dark, it strips away the glorification that you might see in Marvel or DC, although it does have kind of that grittier feel that you might see in The Batman. But still, very, very different, and completely different take, and it was just masterful. It's interesting how I've liked this more as time went on, because I wasn't as keen on the final fifth. Because, as I said, when I read it, I really enjoyed kind of the grittiness, the personal nature, the psychological analysis. And during the final part of this, it becomes a lot more epic in scope, and I think it lost some of those qualities. But as time's gone on, I've kind of forgiven that more, and I just reflect on it with more love than I did even when I closed the final page. So yeah, it's very interesting how your interpretations and your feelings on text changes over time, and this is a classic example of that for me. And then one that I've read quite recently actually is Jade City by Fonda Lee. Now I see why so many people have been raving about the Green Bone Saga. This is just top-notch fantasy. It does everything really well. From the characters to the plot, the world building, the familial political machinations, and the history and lore to the world as well. And of course the writing style. It all just clicks together really, really well. It's like a well-oiled... What's well-oiled? A well-oiled factory. I don't know. Maybe I should know more as an English student, but yeah, it's a well-oiled machine, this, and it all just clicks together. It was one that didn't blow me away out of the water. For the first half, I really enjoyed it. I felt eased into the story, engaged, and then it got a bit more of that X factor in the final quarter, and there are some big shocks along the way. It's been compared to The Godfather, but I wouldn't really say so. They only say that because it's Godfather-esque, and so I understand why it's advertised as that, because then people immediately understand this is a family saga which is mafia-based. But it's not like The Godfather, it's very different, but it does have those themes of how far we go for your family, following the family leader, and those conflicts with the other families as well. And the other clans, as they're called in this. But it's really brilliant, and I loved the ending, and it's got me so excited for book 2, Jade War. And so that was another book that just has really blown me away recently, and another one that I cannot wait to carry on with the series. But going away from series, returning to a standalone, this is Horns. It is dark comedy, thriller, horror, and so it's not outright fantasy, but because it's got that supernatural element, I've decided to include it in fantasy, because it's speculative fiction. Horns is by Joe Hill, the son of Stephen King, and we follow a character who a year ago his girlfriend was murdered and he was the main suspect. Now, a year on, he has fallen into a pit of depression and part of an alcoholic as well, and he goes on a big night out. He drinks a lot, he doesn't remember what happened, so he wakes up feeling pretty groggy in the morning. He goes to the mirror, looks up, and he sees that he's growing horns, which he freaks out a bit. He calls his doctor, he's like, I'm seeing hallucinations, I need this sorted. But then he starts to notice that people are revealing their deepest, darkest secrets, and he quickly puts together that this seems to be a side effect of the horns on his head. And so he decides to use this newfound, I wouldn't say power, but newfound ability to discover who killed his girlfriend and how those events came apart. It's brilliantly woven together. We've got a dual timeline, so we go back in time as well, and it's really fantastic how these dual timelines work with each other and add tension to the other, and then suspense and build on character work and just answer and raise so many questions at the same time. Fantastic standalone, one of my favourite standalones of all time. I'll definitely be reading a lot more Joe Hill, and I do have a review of Horns Up on the channel. And then this is historical fantasy, The Words of Kings and Prophets by Shauna Lawless. I'll be reading book 3 of Ghoul Song, the finale of this series, in September, because that's the end of the series and it's published in September. And so I cannot wait to dive into that. So of course, I had to catch up with the series. I've read the first 2 books, read the 2 novellas now, and The Words of Kings and Prophets is just brilliant. We continue following our characters and it's getting intense. The characters are in danger. They're in quite a different situation here. It felt very tense because, without giving spoilers, our POVs are closer together. They are interacting with each other far, far more. And that made the stakes feel like they have risen. And there are other aspects that are really kind of pulling together. And it's annoying not being able to go into more depth because, of course, it'd be spoilers. But if you do ever want to talk about spoilers with books that I talk about on here, please do join the Brothers Gwyn Discord, because we have different channels for the books that we want to talk about. And so, of course, on Discord, you can talk about spoilers without ruining it for other people. But yeah, this is just beautifully written. It's lyrical prose, but kind of stripped back as well. So it's not purple prose. So it really works well within being immersive, but also lyrical and really visual as well. I think that Shauna Lawless strikes a great balance there. And it's just historical fantasy at its best. I love the historical island that we're set in. It feels immersive. I really love learning a bit about the history. And this made me want to read some non-fiction more about the history of late 10th century, early 11th century Ireland. But also you've got that Irish mythology in there as well. You've got the Fomorians and the Tuatha Del Danann. I've probably just butchered those pronunciations, but these mythological groups, I really love the exploration of their enmity in The Words of Kings and Prophets, and I cannot wait to read how this story is concluded with the land of the living and the dead, which is just amazing title. And then I'm not sure how many we've got to go. I think maybe 2. Next up, I have some more self-published. What is going on with this? I've read quite a few self-published books in 2024. And so this is the third one I'm talking about today, is The Murder at Spindle Manor. So I read this because it won the SBFBO award, the Self-Published Fantasy Book Awards, which is run by Mark Lawrence. It's brilliant. A load of self-published authors submit their works for the last year into this competition, and book critics and reviewers all kind of filter them down and choose their favourites until they're in a final. I think there's 10 in the final, and then the average score of all the reviews is collated, and the one with the highest average rating is the winner. And this year it was The Murder at Spindle Manor. And so I need to read more of the winners. Sword of Kaigen was a winner. I think Rob J. Hayes was a winner in the past. And so I've really enjoyed those authors and books, so I thought I'd try it again, and it's another one that has clicked. This was really great. It's that Sherlock Holmesian, Agatha Christie kind of murder mystery, because it is set over one night. We know there's a murder in the mist. We know there's a monster in the mist, which adds the fantastical element, and we are going to find out who they are over the course of one night, where all the suspects are present. We've got our investigator, and it's just awesome. I've been meaning to read a lot more Agatha Christie lately, and then I thought, how about ticking 2 birds with 1 stone? You SPFBO winner and a bit of a murder mystery. There we go. What more can you ask for? I found the first 20-30 pages a little bit hard to get into. I think Morgenstern kind of rushed that introduction, but beyond that, it felt really easy and natural, and it felt like he really enjoyed taking the story and running away with it, with characters that leapt off of the page. And so it was really great. I think if you struggle with the first 10, 20, 30 pages, please push on, and I think it'll really pick up in your opinion, and you'll enjoy the rest. It was riveting, it was great, and I need to read more written by him. And then last up, I've got Play of Shadows by Sebastian D. Castell, a 2024 release. He is one of my favourite authors, and Play of Shadows kicks off a whole new series. We follow Damalas Shadowmantane, which I've said on the channel before. What a name. Damalas Shadowmantane. Absolutely fantastic. I love the swashbuckling tone of this book. I love the wit, the humour, and the character relationships and bromances that you see in Play of Shadows, which has become a hallmark of Sebastian de Castell's writing. But something very different in Play of Shadows, which I loved, was that our main character, he escapes people chasing after him by joining a play and a theatre group, which he thinks will help him melt into the shadows and be safe for a while. But little does he know he's going to be thrown into the centre of the attention of the whole city through the play he is in, because it comments on political matters. And I loved how Sebastian de Castell kind of mocked these actors that take themselves too seriously, and then others who are kind of there just to get away from the world, and others who are there just pretending they're really professional actors when they're not. I loved that satirical nature to Play of Shadows, but I also loved how we also kind of philosophically get shown the power of art with the influence this play has on the city and the political events of this book, and how it really thrust the characters into danger and a lot of tension. And it was amazing how Sebastian managed to do both at the same time. And of course, with his really smooth prose, his witty humour, his laugh out loud moments, and his standout characters who you're invested in, what more could you ask for? So there you go. They are 8 fantasy books that I have really, really, really enjoyed in 2024 so far. It wasn't one for each month, but it was choosing 8 because it's been 8 months of the year. But I wasn't choosing one for January, one for February, one for March. I just chose 8 fantasy books I've really enjoyed this year. And they are the 8. I hope that you've read some of them. I hope this video has interested you in a few others. I hope that you pick a few up. Please let me know if you've got any answers to those questions and those wishes of mine in the comments down below. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading some more fantasy for the rest of the year. Some great series to carry on with, such as the Greenbone Saga, and doing a read-along of Papa Gwyn's The Bloodsworn Saga over on the Brothers Gwyn Discord. We'll be doing that in September, October, November. I didn't include rereads in this list. I should have said that at the beginning, which is why, of course, Of Blood and Bone and The Shadow of the Gods will not be on there, as well as some other rereads this year, which I've just forgotten off the top of my head. But yeah, rereads not counted, only new reads. But if you do want some new fantasy favourites, I think the Bloodsworn Saga could be one for you if you've not read it already. So please do join the Brothers Gwyn read-along running from September to November. But that's it from me today. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Happy reading and stay safe.